everyone. Welcome to another episode of Front Row. With me I have Mr Aslam Perwaiz, Deputy Executive Director of the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. Let me begin with the very name of your organization. It assumes that there will be disasters, and then it says we should be prepared for them. Is that what it's about? Can't we get rid of disasters?
We cannot get rid of disaster. I think it goes in centuries and centuries. It's part of life. Yes, we cannot get rid of disaster. But it means that you invest in preparedness, you can mitigate the impact of the disaster.
I've interacted with your organization for many years, so I know where it started and so on. Has there been a shift now more towards sort of private sector also being included in the picture? Or was it, in the old days we were talking about governments mostly. Is that correct?
No, with the change of the risk space that we are dealing with, certainly now private sector has become one of the most prominent stakeholder, together with the government for sure. But private sector currently, globally as well, and as well as in Asia and Pacific, also in Sri Lanka, I see the role of Ceylon Chamber of Commerce in the last 5 years that they are actually have engaged with the Ministry of Disaster Management. The role has enhanced, and I think this was one of the contribution from the global framework that we talk, the Hyogo framework of action, and now the current one, which is the Sendai framework of action. And just before the Sendai framework that we adopted in 2015, there was a very big meeting called by the Japanese government and with all these big private sectors, because the realization came from 2011 per se, that if we really have to move ahead with reducing the development gains, the private sector needs to be on the forefront. Both the private sector will prepare themselves, but at the same time they actually would shoulder to shoulder help the government in ensuring that the infrastructure, the other investments are resilient. So yes, private sector is at the forefront of the stakeholder, and we at ADPC give equal importance in business resilience by engaging private sector in disaster risk reduction.
So one of the issues that we've been having is that as our warning systems get better and our procedures get better, we can move human beings out of harm's way and reduce casualties, deaths. But we can't move their livelihoods out of the way. The cattle are there, the factories are there, the little workshops, the tools of their trade. We have to tell them to run without these things. How do we address this problem? Because in economic terms, that's the big one. More people surviving, more people without livelihoods.
Yeah, that's the biggest one. That is the biggest one. And for this, of course, is disaster risk reduction or disaster management is not just simply an issue of responses and recovery after a disaster. If you look at the overall development patterns, so for example, why I would build a house on the riverbed when I already know that it will certainly have an impact, even if I've been evacuated by the government. So the question here comes that what kind of developmental policies, the developmental programs and the schemes that government should build or the private sector should invest that actually would take care of this. Now by saying this, we are also equally facing the problem of population growth coupled with the unplanned kind of planning and development. The issue is whether or not we should invest more on infrastructures that would safeguard the livelihoods, and very specific to, let's say, farmers. The kind of housing patterns that we tell them with the traditional practices that they have, we only have to add on. And take example from Cambodia, by the way. They reel under annual flood every day, but they save their cattle. How? They have a house on the tilts. So they have like, the first floor and the second floor. These are still the kacha house that we generally talk, the traditional houses. Leave aside the urban issue that we say. So I think there is a problem, but there is a solution. We only have to look at this. Protecting the livelihood should be the main emphasis of any kind of investment, whether public or private. We have technologies now and good early warning system. You take the people out, but houses are damaged, livelihoods, cattle and other things just gets lost, roads, bridges. So I think the investment should be there, and I'm pretty sure that by having that one we can reduce the economic losses.
But you see, we began by saying disasters are unavoidable. That means risk is part of life. So that means that, on the coast, there's always a danger of tsunami. When I go somewhere else, there's a danger of flood. When I go somewhere else, there's a danger of landslides. So where do I go is the question, right? Yeah. So when there was a proposal, actually the president of this country gave a directive that everybody has to move away from the coast after the tsunami. I was one of the people who said, what kind of rubbish is this? Because you can't just abandon the coast. Where are we going? How are we going to make a living? I said, let's do insurance, let's do risk mitigation, let's do tsunami resilient architecture, rather than just tell people to abandon. Luckily, that proposal was abandoned. What are your reactions?
I again relate this one with the experiences, because for example, we certainly live by the standards of Sri Lankan economy, for sure. But when it comes to reducing certain impacts, and when I say that disasters are unavoidable because the kind of development change that we have seen, let's learn from Netherlands. There is no problem for Sri Lanka learning from Netherlands. We can compare the economy and the size of the economy and the scale of the economy. The simple point is the whole situation of the coastal zone management, for example. We certainly cannot ask the fishermen to stay 5 kilometers away from that one. That's their livelihood. But can we ensure that we have preventive measures, we have enough preventive measures that would sustain their livelihood immediately after that? They don't want to go to the sea when they already have a warning. But the apathy is that we haven't reached to that level that we have given the confidence to the people. And then most of our plans are built and tried based on the assumption that the people would accept. We never engage the people. So very specific to the coastal line problem, the problem is really very huge. And the river plains, yeah, the huge problem. But I think there is a solution, engaging the people in the very beginning, alternate livelihood situations. And I again give you an example of Netherlands, just because that I have just recently visited for 10 days and learned. There has been cases where private sector has been engaged to build a confidence in the people that if they have to relocate, what are the implications? And I can still show you that without a big hue and cry, without the very much negative impact to the community, but it had a huge cost to the government. They were able to move the people out of the danger zone by providing everything. So traditional knowledge, traditional livelihood is very good. It is not that they were just asked to forego their traditional livelihood. Just by scientific advancement, we have scientifically advanced. So there are cases available. I think we only have to learn. Rest, of course, we are
with the intensity of the rains, the rainfall seems to be becoming more intense. I think the dangers of landslides, which are very localized but devastating issues, is becoming a much more serious problem in Sri Lanka. I think all over the world, but I'm thinking about this place. So when this happens, there seems to be no alternative but to move people out. But again, these are livelihoods. This land they have had in their family for God knows how long, and so on. So this is quite a challenge to move people out. Do you see any role for insurance in this?
Insurance has a big role, but just imagine even today, less than 5% penetration of the insurance, because the reinsurance is confidence building measure there. There is a role for risk transfer. First of all, I mean, because I work for disaster preparedness, I come from a slightly different connotation, is that there is a risk, we already know about it. There is certain percentage of the risk that we want to absorb it just because of our resilience capacity, coping capacity mechanism. There is only very little bit of the risk that we are not able to manage. For that, risk transfer is one mechanism. Within risk transfer, insurance is one of a good tool to do a risk. But risk transfer and insurance is not equivalent. We are dealing with a big risk transfer issues. Nature-based solutions play a very important role. While you insure your property, your livelihood and other things, but you include risk transfer mechanism with nature-based solutions.
So there's no single fix.
No
it's
single
a
fix.
Multiple toolkit.
It's a multiple
tools that we have to use.
multi-dimensional thing that we have to
Okay.
do.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
insights.
Thank you.